I just got back from a trip to Myanmar, and while I was en route to the country, I found out that Congressman Aaron Schock was going to be there, too. He was there to help free a peace activist from prison, a job President Obama, well, couldn't get that done. 17 years in a brutal Burmese prison. That's the penalty Dr. Tun Aung was supposed to pay for a crime that he'd never committed.
Many people have tried, requested for my release, but it didn't happen.
Congressman Aaron Schock, and on the record, went to Myanmar, a war-torn country in Southeast Asia. And now, after serving 2 long years in prison, Dr. Tun Aung is a free man.
It's very unusual. So a simple person, such a big man from the U.S. Congress, has to come for my release.
Back in summer 2012, brutal violence breaks out between Muslims and Buddhists in the country. And Dr. Tun Aung is convicted of inciting riots. Dr. Tun Aung's daughter and numerous eyewitnesses say the doctor, a Muslim leader and political peace activist, was actually there to stop the violence. Was he part of the demonstrations?
No.
Not at all?
Not at all. He was with the authorities, actually.
The chaos killing 300 people and leaving nearly 150,000 innocent civilians suddenly homeless. Just months after the violence peaked in 2012, Myanmar received a special visitor.
Myanmar Nangan Minglaba.
President Obama visiting the country and making his move to get Myanmar's government to release its political prisoners.
Hundreds of prisoners of conscience have been released, and forced labor has been banned.
But Dr. Tun Aung didn't get his freedom. The activist spending more than 2 more years in prison after the president's visit.
We haven't done anything wrong.
And finally, justice for Dr. Tun Aung and his family. After years behind bars, the peace activist walks free.
I'm very grateful, and I appreciate it very much for their effort for my release.
And Representative Aaron Schock joins us. It's fun when it turns out right, isn't it?
It does. Happy ending.
It really was. Tell me, why this man? Why did you travel halfway around the world to help this man?
Well, you know, our office has been involved in human rights issues around the world, and I just had the idea a little over a year ago, sat down with my staff and said, let's pick one of these wrongfully imprisoned people in the world, and let's just make a concerted effort and try and get him out. And so we began working every angle that we could, and got in touch with the Prague Freedom Foundation and some businessmen that were doing work in Myanmar that could put us in touch with the right government officials. And this really was a team effort. It was a lot of NGO groups, Amnesty International and others that have been working on this for years. And we're just excited that our efforts paid off. All
right, President Obama tried in November 2012. We heard the tape from him. And then he was there again in November of 2014, a couple months ago. And what did he try then in this recent November? And why didn't he get him out?
Well, I'm not going to speak necessarily for the Myanmar government, other than I will say that not just the president, but our State Department, our ambassador, has been on this case for quite some time. I think part of what we have to consider is some of these governments who have wrongfully imprisoned people are looking for a politically palatable way to let them out. And so they're looking not to be, overtly pressured, not to be kind of beat over the head by the great United States of America, but rather, in the case of Tun Aung, I think they knew that he shouldn't be in prison, certainly not for 17 years, and after having spent 2 years, finally agreed to release him to me when I was over there. And, we want Myanmar to move into the 21st century. We want them to become a democracy, and in order for them to do that, for us to lift the sanctions eventually that we have against them, they can't have people wrongfully held in prison, and Tun Aung was one of them.
It's wonderful that, that they released him, but I tell you, the day that I left, I read that the military was accused of raping and murdering 2 Baptist missionaries. So, I mean, it was a nice gesture to the United States, but there's a lot going on in that country.
Right. Well, I mean, look, they have work to do. I mean, this is a country who was ruled by military leaders for much of the last century, and now just are getting ready to have their democratic elections later this year. It's why the president's made 2 trips there in the last couple of years. I think there can be a lot of good done for humanity there if they truly embrace democracy, enforce the rule of law, allow for freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and that was the message that I took to the leadership there in the government.
What did they say he did? What did the government say he did?
He was originally accused of inciting violence, but all of the witnesses, and that's why he was thrown in prison for 17 years, which, even by U.S. standards, 17 years is a long time just for inciting violence. But he actually, all of the witnesses said he was actually there trying to calm the violence. And if you talk to the man, he's the most peaceful guy in the world. And it's clear that he was wrongfully accused.
Well, if you go to Greta Talk on iTunes, I interviewed a woman named Zinmar. She's 34 years old. I interviewed her here in Washington. She was here studying for something. She was, when she said 22, she was handing out pro-democracy leaflets. She got sentenced to prison for 28 years. She served 12 years, 9 in solitary confinement for handing out leaflets.
Wow. What country was that?
In Burma, in Myanmar. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, so, sometimes we forget how good we have it.
It is, and I think we should refocus our efforts. I know the president was leaving India and going to Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of countries we have relationships with who keep political prisoners and people who have their religious beliefs in prison simply for their beliefs, and we need to double down our efforts to get those people out of prison that are wrongfully held.
Well, congratulations, Congressman. You got him out, so good work. Great. You and a couple others. Anyway,
good to be with you.